Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Thursday evening. It is NFL Honors Night, so I don't know if people are super invested into that. J.K. Dobbins is up for Comeback Player of the Year. I hope he wins. He should win. Otherwise, not a ton of Chargers flair to that, but we'll see what happens there. So today we are here to dive into some free agent pass catchers. So one of the things we're doing this year is going to be sorting free agent targets into tiers. And the first up is the pass catching category. We initially were going to plan on doing this as just like playmakers, but the running back free agent class sucks. It is horrible. So this is pass catchers only, receivers and tight ends. And joining me to do that is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad you mentioned it. Looked to the running backs and I went, how do I sit here and try to convince everyone, like Najee Harris, guys? Not that he's terrible, but at his price, with the efficiency, it's like, I really got to get up here and do that. So I'm glad we decided to go with tight ends and receivers today. And frankly, I think that's fine. This running back class is phenomenal.
Yeah, the running back class is phenomenal. And it is, to me, it's just like we've said before, it's just easy. Bring back JK, and then you go from there. Najee Harris is projected 3 years at $11.5 million per year. He has never averaged more than 4.0 yards per carry in his career. He has only averaged above 3 yards after contact per attempt once in his career. I messaged Arjun about this, but to see if there's any new data, because obviously Saquon and Derrick Henry are at a certain stages of their career. If you take those two players out, for the most part, once you hit like 1,400 carries, you really start to decline as a running back. And so I'm sitting there like talking with Arjun, like, okay, what if an inefficient running back hits that number? Like, what happens to his career? And it's just not pretty, man. It's not. So he has 1,100 carries. I'm just not interested. So, the 33rd team was like, oh, the Chargers should sign him because they want to run the football. I'm like, J.K. Dobbins was better than him, and this running back class is awesome. So I have zero interest in this running back free agent group. I just, if the Chargers enter the draft with nobody else besides Gus and Kamani and Hassan Haskins, honestly, that's cool with me. I don't care because this running back class in the draft is amazing.
Yes, I completely agree. But today, pass catchers, free agents, and not like the greatest class ever, but you can find some gems in there.
Yeah, I would say I think I feel a little bit better about this group after like really deep diving into them doing this exercise. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I know there's obviously a big demand for the Chargers to go sign pass catchers. And so hopefully some of these guys are, interesting to you. There are going to be some players who we left off today, which we can get to as well. But I like I said, I think I feel better about this group after preparing for this show than I did previously.
Yeah, as do I. And even by just focusing on pass catchers, we eliminate running backs anyway because Greg Roman's not going to throw them the football. So even more reasons to exclude running backs today.
Yes. For anyone wondering, as Calvin is in the chat, these are not trade targets. So we did trade targets on a different episode, which was Monday's episode, which was great timing for us. So if you missed trade targets, just go back to the previous episode and watch that after you watch this episode. So again, that is previous episode that we covered there. We are not talking about those players again tonight. Super cool. I don't think we've ever had this before. But Michelle, I don't really know how to say that. I'm sorry, but he sent in a super chat earlier. And then with his comment, he says, "Hey guys, thank you very much for all of your work. Excellent content following already from 2022 from Slovakia." I can't say I've ever seen anybody from Slovakia in the live chat. So Michelle, however you say it, we greatly appreciate you. Please let me know in the chat how I say your name correctly because I would like to get it right. But we appreciate the support and how cool that you can tune in live for this episode. So thank you and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much. Obviously, since 2022, there may have been a comment here and there, or sometimes in just like the video, like the regular comments after a video is posted, but I don't remember him in the live chat before. So since 2022 is pretty cool. Thank you for for whatever reason on this particular video for commenting.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's get into these free agent targets. And it's going to be no surprise who the first player on this list is, but so this is kind of a ranking, if you will, of 10 players who we would like to see the Chargers target, and then we are tiering them into categories based off of how we feel about them overall as players. So again, no real surprise here, but the first player who is by himself in tier 1, which we are calling top of the market game changers. These are this is a player, future players, potentially on other shows, might be more players in this category, but these are players who can elevate the ceiling of your passing offense, of your rushing offense, of your pass rush, whatever. And so the player in tier 1 is Mr. Tee Higgins, the unequivocal number 1 pass catching free agent target for the Chargers and for any team. Yeah. We'll get into some of his stuff in the future, but Joe Burrow was on the Radio Row tour today, and he made it pretty clear that he does want Tee Higgins back. He wants Jamar Chase back. He wants Trey Hendrickson back. He even mentioned Mike Gesicki, who is also in this show, back. So he is going out there publicly saying that he wants everybody back, and that is obviously going to start with Tee Higgins.
Let me do a quick search of the Cincinnati Bengals cap space, because it sounds like you found a lot of people back that I don't know if they can actually.
Yeah, it's not a great cap situation. They have a lot of players who have like previously requested trades, and like Trey Hendrickson is not happy with his contract and has requested a trade. Jamar Chase is, like we've said before, is going to be pushing like $40 million. So it's not a great situation, man. It really isn't.
Yeah, they're not. They still have $46 million, but how much of that is going to, a Chase or although he'd be on his 5th-year option, huh? And yes. Then
so theoretically, if you extend Jamar Chase, his cap hit this year could be lowered. But the Bengals also, it's a cash issue as well. So like they don't have the cash to do all of these big contracts all at the same time. So that is the other thing to be considered there.
Yeah, can't relate. I have no cash issues. Just kidding. I have plenty of cash issues. I'm in student loans. Anyway,
yeah, student loans are real.
The real thing, man. They are definitely a real thing. Who will not have to worry about any cash is Tee Higgins wherever he signs. I don't know where $28 million per year would rank for him in terms of other wide receivers. It's clearly not like a market resetter. He won't even be the number 1 guy on his own team if both guys come back, obviously. But it's a pretty solid contract. And I think in terms of what the Chargers need, it's perfect. He's exactly what the Chargers need. And frankly, I didn't realize how big this dude was until I saw him play live and almost destroy the Chargers defense. We had a heck of a day as is. Whatever he's listed at, watching him live and watching him across from like a Cam Hart, who's not short, is a big dude. Like this is a really tall, big dude who can absolutely 100% play the X and play it phenomenally for you. He's a fantastic player. The numbers haven't been exceptional in terms of like, he's not a 1700, 1800 yard kind of guy. He's not Jamar Chase. He's not Justin Jefferson. He's not, Tyreek Hill when he was pushing that. But he's been a very, very solid player who's put up good numbers. Not that he's been consistent in terms of injuries, and that is maybe the main concern is the injury history, especially the last couple of years, and spending that much on a guy who's missed 5 games each of the last 2 years. But given his absences, his production has been very solid.
Yeah. So in terms of his contract, he's obviously on. He was on the franchise tag this year. Actually, I forgot to edit that part. But his projection from PFF would be 4 years, $28 million APY. That would be actually below Jalen Waddle and Devontae Adams. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That would be wide receiver 9, technically on the market right now. So I do think that projection from PFF is maybe a little hedging their bet, so to speak, on him potentially re-signing in Cincinnati, because I think the chances of him, if he does hit the open market, like we're talking about him in this way, other teams and other fans are going to be talking about him this way. Unequivocally the best wide receiver available through the draft or through free agency, in my opinion. If you need a wide receiver, you are probably talking about Tee Higgins. So him signing for $28 million per year, to me, only really happens in Cincinnati if he decides to take like a kind of a hometown discount to stay there. If he hits the open market, I don't see a way he signs for less than $30 million. So $30 million would put him at wide receiver 4. If he could sign for more than, like, if he could sign for $30.5 million, that would put him at wide receiver 3. I don't really see him getting past AJ Brown's $32 million per year. But I could see him surpassing Brandon Ayuk at 30, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown is at 30.02, which is super random to me. It sounds like he basically was just like, just give me a smidge more than Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
But as Tom points out in the chat, if he hits free agency, there's absolutely going to be a bidding war. You know, the Patriots, the Chargers. I'm sure there are several other teams who really, really need a wide receiver of this kind of caliber. And so I do think that contract projection from PFF is a little light, perhaps banking on him staying home.
Yeah, I agree. If he hits the open market, there's reasons to go to the Chargers that are frankly because they're better than the Patriots and have maybe a more clear direction and an established quarterback. And so I could see the allure of going to the Chargers over a team like the Patriots. But at the end of the day, if it is a bidding war, one, I don't think Joe Ortiz would overpay for anyone. Didn't last year, granted, different circumstances. Two, at the end of the day, the Patriots can just say, you want $45 million, you can have it. They won't do that. I don't think they'll do that. But they can basically go, what are the Chargers offering? We will add significantly more than that. And so the Chargers are kind of stuck. Either it returns to Cincinnati or they're going to be 5th in terms of how much they are going to be willing to spend on his contract. So very, very tricky situation. Would love him on the Chargers. I just, this one doesn't feel possible or as possible to me, or at least it's not as easy as I think maybe some people would think it is.
Yeah, just looking at the teams who have the most cap space, the Commanders have obviously a ton of cap space. They have $78 million in cap space. That would make a lot of sense. They're the team that's kind of being floated around for a lot of players. I mean, everybody in the media is talking about them going to get Myles Garrett. Everybody is talking about them getting Tee Higgins because they have the space and because they just made the NFC Championship game in Jaden Daniels' first year. So a lot of people expecting the Commanders to be big-time players in free agency. Patriots have a ton of money. Chargers have a ton of money. The Raiders have a lot of money. And they just threw $6 million at Chip Kelly. Again, that doesn't count towards the cap, but the Raiders are being aggressive in the coaching market. So there's a lot of teams out there that, again, would really love to have Tee Higgins. So if he hits the market, I expect him to sign for a good chunk of change. Definitely more than $28 million per year. So people debating in the chat if he is worth that kind of money. I understand the concerns there because he has been a highly productive player, and for the Chargers specifically, he absolutely 100% solves your boundary issues right away. ESPN does charting. They have an open score, a yak score, a catch score, and then they kind of overall average it. He was 14th in their charting. The film nerds love him, say he's like consistently open, and his production from a counting stat standpoint hasn't been amazing, but he does play with a Jamar Chase and he has dealt with some injuries as well. But the film community loves Tee Higgins. The efficiency numbers love Tee Higgins. He has great production from a yards per route run versus man and zone. And so there's a lot to like, but I do think that there are some concerns that people are going to bring up that are valid, right? The missed time for me is a big deal. He's missed 10 games in the last 2 seasons. And despite his physical frame that you talked about, he's only registered a contested catch rate above 50% one time in 5 seasons. So it's kind of like a bit of a confusing resume, if you will, because the talent, the stats, the data, it all points to somebody who could be a legit like wide receiver 1 in this class, but he hasn't really taken that big step for a variety of reasons, but
Mhm.
injuries are part of it. Maybe some inconsistencies with the contested catch stuff is interesting. So I am 100% in favor of the signing, but I do think I understand why some people would be a little questionable on the price tag for Tee Higgins.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up what Kevin brings up here too is, with our offense and our passing volume, is T worth that top of market price? In a perfect Harbaugh world, we're only dropping back
Great point.
25 to 30 times. Now, I do think that, okay, let's say they do drop back 25 to 30 times a game. Congratulations, that now becomes 15 of them go to T Higgins. Like that target share goes, it goes in the right place. So I
Yeah.
don't think T Higgins would not be involved. My question is, and it's kind of what Kevin is also referencing, and some people are referencing in the chat, how much higher can T Higgins go here? Can he even go higher other than being completely healthy and being the only target? Because look, I know Jamar Chase and I know Lab McConkey is not Jamar Chase, but how are you not targeting McConkey a ton next year,
Yeah.
in year 2? And Greg Roman seems very comfortable with unleashing him from the start of the season next year versus the beginning of the year, maybe a bit more hesitant. So with McConkey probably getting another 125, 130 targets, where is the role for Higgins to expand upon and be kind of not worth the contract? I don't want to say like if he puts up 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, I don't say it's not worth the contract.
Yeah.
But if you're starting to say, okay, 28 million versus now we're hitting into a bidding war, at what point do you go, look, the Chargers absolutely could use 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns on their offense next year. That's not from McConkey. But is it worth $30 million to do that? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the Greg Roman part of this also has to be accounted for because, that Greg's never really shown an ability to sustain 2 high-end wide receivers. I guess in San Francisco, you could maybe count, Crabtree and Vernon Davis, but Vernon Davis is a tight end, so he's not getting the same kind of volume. So for the Chargers specifically with this offense, with this situation, I think that does add to a potential concern. And if you're Tee Higgins, and we can have different debates about quarterbacks, right? But if you are Tee Higgins evaluating your options, Cincinnati doesn't want you, right? If you're evaluating your options and you can go to New England and be the unquestioned number 1 target versus Washington, and maybe you're not unquestioned number 1, but
Mhm.
depending how he feels about Terry McLaurin, you're maybe in a similar situation with Jamar Chase, plus a younger quarterback, plus the team who just made the NFC Championship, or the Chargers, who everybody thinks they want to run the football a shit ton, and which was not the reality this past season. And Lad McConkey is there, so again, there's all these situations that T is going to have to evaluate. Which team gives him the best chance to win? Which team gives him the best chance to play into January and February? That's obviously going to play a factor as well. So for the Chargers, does Tee Higgins make sense from a roster perspective? Yes, 100%. But I do think the price tag and the kind of lack of a surefire, way to get surplus value for his contract because of his role, because of the offense, I do think I'm maybe a little more out on this than the fan base is, but he is unquestionably the top option for the pass catching market. So it is kind of a catch 22 where it's like, I don't
Right.
know, like the more you think about it, I don't know if this makes sense for the plan, for the philosophy, but the roster 100% needs Tee Higgins on it if they are going
Yep.
to maximize Justin Herbert. So it is kind of a
Yeah.
double-edged sword, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. So if you had to make a guess, let's just say it's Chargers or anybody else, you would guess that it is not the Chargers for T Higgins.
Yeah, I would say anybody else would be the favorite there. I still think like the most likely outcome is that he does stay in Cincinnati, whether that's on the franchise tag or a different contract. But um, if you're the Bengals and you're hearing Joe Burrow go out on any show who will have him and say, I need T. Higgins back, I just don't know, man. Like they're gonna have a ton of issues if T leaves from a just like vibe standpoint. And it's not like they have other players behind him. So
Mm-mm.
um I would say Cincinnati. and just kind of like what people have been saying at the Radio Row, I would say Washington is probably who I would say is second on that list.
Yeah, and that would make sense. I think it's sort of like the Chargers, a good blend with Terry. They have the rookie contract, they have the space. Yeah, it's I don't know if it's a bummer. I'd love to see Tee Higgins on the Chargers, but I also get why the other options make more sense for him, and maybe not so much for the Chargers.
Yeah, but still number one on my list for preferred free agents. I think I haven't like fully decided if it's him or Osa Odigizua, but Tee Higgins is definitely in the running for like number one overall target for me.
Is that over Trey Smith, or are we assuming he's returning?
Over Trey Smith. I think Tee Higgins and Osa Odigizua are better overall football players than Trey Smith. And I think they're going to have a better chance of giving you surplus value. Trey Smith, I think, is a very good guard who is going to be paid like the number one guard in football. And I don't agree. There's too many penalties and pass blocking issues for me to look at him that way. Stylistically, great fit for the Chargers, but I do think that there are better football players that they could spend on if they want to be at this kind of in this kind of world of free agent.
Yeah, I get you. Cool.
All right, here. So next we are going to have tier 2 starters, which we are dubbing Pricey starters, which this was a bigger group than I think we initially anticipated. The first one is obviously Chris Godwin, who is the second ranked wide receiver in PFF's rankings. I think he's top 5 in their rankings overall. So his previous contract was a 3-year, $20 million per year contract. That was the year, obviously, that Mike Williams, him, Christian Kirk, all these guys signed the 3-year, $20 million deal. And essentially, PFF is projecting a repeat for Chris Godwin, despite the injuries and things like that. So it's a pretty hefty contract for him, but $20 million at wide receiver is obviously not what it once was. When the Chargers signed Mike Williams to $20 million per year, I think that was like wide receiver 6 on the market. Now $20 million is, let me count, wide receiver 17 on the market. So it's a bit of a different landscape, but that is what PFF does project for Chris Godwin.
Yeah, and even with Mike Williams' contract, it was built in a way where the first 2 years, I believe, were pretty manageable. It wasn't like 20 million, 20 million, 20 million. It was very manageable. The third year, then they just cut him. So I could definitely see that here. This free agent class is so tricky, and we mentioned with Higgins. We're going to talk about here with Godwin, some guys coming up. But I mean, you tell me like Hopkins and Cooper and Godwin and Higgins are hitting free agents, and you're going, holy cow, the Chargers can get any of these guys in there. What an amazing group of guys. But each one comes with their own issues, and Godwin definitely plays more on the outside than I think some people maybe think. Like it's kind of a flip-flop year for him sometimes, where it's like 30%, 70%, 70%, 30%. So he can do both. I'm not worried about the fit with the Chargers here. I love this photo, by the way. Like whoever took this photo, fantastic. You ended up using it as the thumbnail because it's beautiful. But he is, I think, after Higgins, the clear next best guy, and you put that here as well, the next best receiver on the market. And I did not catch this, so I'm glad you caught this. Whatever reason, everybody and Jeff Carpenter knows each other. Chargers offensive quality control, wide receivers coach Jeff Carpenter was at Penn State as a graduate and undergrad. That's with Mike Gesicki written there. I'm going to assume that he was there the same time. That you're good.
He was. You're good. So you caught the Mike Gesicki thing, and then I copied and pasted it and forgot to update it.
It's all good. Totally fine. So great connection, need. I think even the contract, which sounds like a lot, but as you mentioned, other guys will get paid. So what is he going to end up being? Wide receiver 19 in terms of APY, if that's what it is. Yeah. All that sounds good. It's the multiple season-ending injuries in the last few years that really, really are concerning for me. Yeah. Again, wide receiver 17, 18, 19, 20 in terms of contract is not the worst thing ever, but still paying a good amount of money and a good amount of guarantees to a big risk like that is, well, it's very risky. And so I do have some concerns there.
Yeah, I think the injury history is definitely baked into this kind of contract projection, because hypothetically speaking, if he does not get injured this past season, I think he's potentially in the conversation with Tee Higgins for the best wide receiver available on the market. But the injury, you have to take it into consideration. So He worked his way back from the ACL in 2021 at a really, really high level. So there still was been very good football from him on the field. But another injury, I think it was a dislocated kneecap, if I'm not mistaken. Feel free and correct me in the chat or in the comments if I'm wrong there. So it sucks that another injury happened, right? But he was still extremely productive. This past season, he was actually, so I looked at a few areas to try and, quantify how these players did. Obviously, PFF, who we've referenced a few times. I looked at Next Gen Stats. I looked at ESPN's charting. And so Next Gen Stats has this chat, dislocated ankle. Okay, my mistake. I knew it was, I thought I remembered it being a dislocation. So dislocated ankle. Appreciate TJM there for clarifying. But I looked at Next Gen Stats, and they have obviously rushing over expectation is like the big thing that they are known for. But they also do other things like yards after catch above expectation. And I think Chris Godwin has like this very specific like tone and connotation around him, which would not seemingly indicate somebody who would be 7th in the league in yak above expectation. But that's the case. Like, he is a guy who consistently creates explosive plays after the catch. Like, it's one of his best attributes. He obviously fits the archetype of somebody who the Chargers are probably looking for at wide receiver, of somebody who can block and make tough catches. I love this statistic. He has hit over 54% of contested catches every single year of his career. He had the second highest catch score on ESPN. He very rarely drops passes. And so this is a guy who I think if Jim Harbaugh could find like Anquan Bolden 2.0, who he had in San Francisco, Chris Godwin is probably it. Like, this is the guy who is, over the middle machine, contested catches, yards after catch, veteran leader. He blocks, everything like that. So I think Chris Godwin checks a lot of boxes. His best work has been in the slot, but he can play outside. He can play out wide. So in 2023, last 2 seasons ago at this point, he had 1,100 yards and he played 60% of his snaps out wide. So he can play out there. It's just that his best role is in the slot. So the Chargers would have to weigh that as a team who probably would play him out wide versus a team who would sign him and play in the slot. And so that, along with the injuries, those are potentially, concerns for the fit and the contract for the Chargers.
I think his versatility inside and outside makes him we say this all the time, like, yeah, it makes him great. He's so flexible and versatile. But I honestly, and it's partially, maybe mostly due to the roster, watching Greg Roman try to design anything for an X receiver down the field, I didn't really feel like I ever saw much materialize that felt like it worked or anything. The fact that he can move around, what I watched Greg Roman do for McConkey was very different. And they still attacked vertically with him, got him a lot of work after the catch. Maybe there's some redundancy in role here, but I've seen Greg Roman take that kind of player, different kinds of players, I guess, but different yak guys, middle of the field guys, and make it work. So I think with Chris Godwin, even if there's some overlap, I think it's a good thing. I don't really mind the Chargers going after someone who has an overlapping role with McConkey, because A, I believe McConkey can do more, and B, Godwin obviously can play outside as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think this checks a lot of boxes for the Chargers. Like, the price tag, I think, makes sense, more sense than, $30 million per year for T. There is at least one connection, which we always try and find. The numbers are good. The style fit makes a lot of sense. So I did not head into this show thinking, man, Chris Godwin is like, it just makes a ton of sense, because he does have that reputation of like, he's a slot guy, like all this stuff, but there's a lot more outside work to his game than I think I realized. And then the yards after catch, again, not something I realized. So I think this makes a lot of sense for the Chargers. I think it probably makes more sense than Tee Higgins would.
Yeah. And, honestly, with this and with the draft, again, depends on who's there at 22, but I'm guessing it's not going to be anything spectacular. I do think there are not great, but if you want a boundary guy, an X guy, maybe a sacrificial X guy, a lot of those guys in the draft, some of them with connections to Chargers coaches. So I think if you want to make that, you find your sacrificial X, get Godwin, get McConkey, call it a day, call it an upgraded receiving core. Yeah. I'd get that.
Yeah, man. If you get Ladd, Godwin, Jaden Higgins in the draft, who, or Trey Harris in the draft, then you have Quentin, who I know people don't love right now, but presumably can take another step forward. I think that's a much better situation. So, Chargers fans, I think keep an eye on Mr. Chris Godwin here. Next up, we do have Darius Slayton, who I think the price tag here is going to surprise people. This past season, he signed a 1-year, $6.2 million contract. And apparently he did enough for PFF to slap a 3-year, $12.5 million contract prediction on his resume. So whether or not he's worth that kind of price tag, we'll see. Again, PFF has a very strong track record with these kind of projections. So I don't think they would just throw this out there willy-nilly, because that's a big difference. So $12.5 million is on par kind of for the skill set that he brings to the table. If you look at Darnell Mooney, if you look at Gabe Davis, those are guys all making $12, $13 million per year. And Darius Slayton fits right into that mold. So he is the unquestioned best true deep threat on the market, in my opinion. Over 15 yards per reception, 4 of his 6 seasons. There's a couple 1,000-yard seasons in there. So you're getting a stretch the field. You're getting a guy who can win vertically, open up space for Ladd and future tight end 1 and Quentin and everybody like that. And so it's a little tricky because that's a big number. But that is kind of the going rate for a player of this kind of caliber in this kind of style.
Yeah, I think this feels very Joe Ortiz and the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh and all of this, because I mean, with Tee Higgins, you had Joe Burrow, with oh my gosh, Chris Godwin, some Tom Brady, Baker Mayfield. Like, you've seen maybe the best of what they can do. I'm not sure how much there is. With Slayton, Daniel Jones, Mike Glennon, Jake Fromm, Davis Webb, Tommy DeVito, Tyrod Taylor, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito again. Not quite Justin Herbert. And this feels like one of the ones where they go, yes, $12.5 million is a good amount. You're paying probably a bit of a premium because there's not a huge wide receiver market, and he would be one of those better guys. So I really do feel like this is kind of the move that they would make. Godwin checks a ton of boxes, of course, but 12.5 versus 20 million. Let's say you get Darius Slayton, you feel like, okay, this is a guy's had 1,000 yards with dog doo-doo at quarterback for the most part. Even if you only get 800 to 1,000 yards out of Slayton this year at 12.5 million, that's pretty solid for you. I think this is definitely a buy low. Not a buy low. 12.5 million is not a buy low. But it's, I think, something the Chargers would go after and feel better about, because if he gets, again, if he gets 900 yards and Tee Higgins goes to the Patriots and gets 1,100 for 28 million or 30 million, you're going to take this one.
Yeah, I think obviously the Chargers are going to look for ways that they can create that surplus value. And 12.5 per year for Tee Higgins might seem like a lot, but they can make that work, and they can make that production work, I think. I forgot to put on here, obviously, there is a direct tie here from a coaching staff standpoint. Andy Bischoff, the tight end coach, has been in New York for the previous 2 seasons. I would think they at least know each other or know of each other. And the other thing worth pointing out, I always think it's worth pointing out because the Chargers are prone to sign these kind of players. He was the Giants' Walter Payton Man of the Year, and he just was nominated or announced rather as the NFL Players Association Community MVP. So this is a guy who does a lot of work in the community. This is a guy who has a strong reputation as a leader, as a teammate. And that kind of stuff does matter for the Chargers. It matters for the culture. It matters for this locker room that Jim Harbaugh is trying to build up. And so is Tee Higgins worth $12.5 million? I don't really know, but it's kind of what the market dictates. And I think he can bring some value to the team. Now, the concerns here, obviously, he's pretty well known for a relatively high drop percentage. It was 15.2 this past season. It's at 11% for his career, which is kind of in line for this kind of player. Gabe Davis has like a 12% drop rate. And, these kind of guys who are almost exclusively like vertical threats, they're not always known to have like the strongest hands. And, it's kind of comes with the territory. 40% contested catch rate in his career. So again, this is a guy who you want running straight and fast, and you pay for that kind of production. Maybe you get him on some benders and things like that, but you're not throwing fades to him. You're not throwing contested catches to him. He's not your X. Like, he is firmly your Z flanker receiver. So as long as you understand the kind of player you are getting, I think this is a guy that you can create some surplus value for.
Good question, Calvin. What was Quentin Johnson's drop rate? It wasn't as high as you think, because it was more of like a contested catch issue sometimes.
Yeah.
So PFF did, I think, only gave him like 3 drops on the year, but in terms of contested catches, it was not great. No, it's not loading. I'm just gonna keep stalling until I get.
I got it. It was 9.8 this past year and 5% in 2023.
All of that sounds completely wrong, but okay. 30% contested catch rate, 7 for 23. Good Lord.
Yeah, and that's a guy who is 6'4". So, yeah, he was. The drop percentage is higher this year, but as Mr. Sorrow points out, it's always the moments that Quentin drops the pass, which is why we think of it as so much worse than it actually is. So interesting. Renee thinks that Daniel Popper is gonna, or Renee thinks that Daniel Popper thinks. Sorry, Renee says that Daniel Popper thinks Darius Slayton is going to get $18 million per year. That's kind of crazy to me, just based off the market. So $18 million would put him ahead of Christian Kirk. It would put him right below just what Chris Godwin and all these guys had made. That's ahead of Cortland Sutton. It's ahead of 18 million is kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's not the worst range to be in. But that'd be, pricey.
Yeah. So I agree. I do think this is an area where the Chargers could be looking at for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one here. Again, a price tag I think will surprise some people, but Amari Cooper previously signed 5 years, $100 million in Dallas. Obviously has a direct connection with Sanjay Lal, the Chargers wide receiver coach. They were together for a year and like 14 weeks or whatever it was when he was traded to Dallas from the Raiders. But there is obviously the connection. Sanjay Lal spoke pretty highly of his experience with him, spoke pretty highly of his work ethic and everything like that. So they know he would know how to use him. This is, outside of Tee Higgins, probably the best true X option on the market in terms of a ceiling. The biggest question for me here is, what are we doing with 2024 for Amari Cooper? Because he spent the first half of the season not giving a shit because he was playing with Deshaun Watson, and I don't blame him for that. Sure. And then the Buffalo Bills trade for him, and they didn't really use him. Like, they barely threw him the football. And it kind of seemed like he was just happy to be along for the ride. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what to make of 2024. If you can give me an assurance that this guy still has the 2023 season in him, I'm okay with this price tag. I think the fit makes a lot of sense. There are the connections. But again, I just don't know what to do with 2024 because the numbers are horrendous. There's 0 touches here. So it's a big question mark of what version of Amari Cooper you're getting if you sign him. I think is how teams will have to figure that out.
And I don't think I want to be the team that figures that out. I don't want the Chargers to be, especially if that is the contract as well, compared to some of these other guys. 41 yards in your 3 postseason games. You're right. I'm not speaking specifically about Amari Cooper, but it did feel like he was just kind of there or along for the ride. Like you mentioned, it almost felt like if he were 35 and on his, like, they signed him mid-season and he was just there as a part of the team and he was maybe going to contribute, but like they went and got him. And for them to not even be able to figure out how to integrate him in key moments and for him to disappear in the postseason, and then in the biggest game where they needed him, not much there. I just don't love it. If this were a guy who, it's now just kind of a free agent merchant contract sort of thing. So you're just getting him at 8 to 12 every year. You just keep signing him to a 1-year deal. I could see that. But him to do all that and then command would have potentially a 2-year, $17.5 million deal. I don't love it.
Yeah. I agree. The price tag here is kind of crazy to me given the production. So if this were more of if this were Darius Slayton's numbers at $12.5 million, it's only $5 million difference, right? But I think that would maybe sway me a different direction here. But 17.5, like that's a good chunk of change to pay a receiver where you have this many question marks for him. So I think the on-field production, if you can get 2023, where he had 1,300 yards and averaged 1.96 per route run against man coverage, great. If I can get that guy, awesome. I would love it.
Yeah.
I just don't know how likely it is. The advanced analytic numbers that ESPN does had him as the 8th lowest wide receiver in 2024. And there's like 100 guys on that list. So it was a bad season. It was a weird season. And it's just, I don't know if the Chargers can afford to take this kind of risk.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, before we get to our next tier here, we're 41 minutes in, so I have to tell you guys about our friends over at PrizePicks. We are a few short days away from the Super Bowl. Hopefully you guys have your food spreads ready to go. Hopefully you have all of your PrizePicks selections ready to go, because there are great specials to be had on PrizePicks, and you go to prizepicks.com/guilty to collect. There's also been a ton of madness around the NBA recently. If you're a big Lakers fan and you want to pick Luka Doncic as a Laker on PrizePicks, you can definitely go and do that. And so we definitely encourage you to go check out prizepicks.com/guilty, regardless of what sport you are a fan of, regardless of what team you are a fan of. They absolutely have you covered. Super easy to use, super user-friendly. All you have to do is pick more or less than on a specific stat. Looks like I lost Tyler, so that's great. Oh, shit. Hopefully he comes back, because he has the slideshow in here as well. But again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout for the best and easiest daily fantasy sports. All right. I'm gonna have to download our slideshow real quick. So live TV, everybody, here we'll figure out this situation while Tyler is figuring out his Wi-Fi situation. So this is live TV, folks. This is what you get sometimes. The show goes on, unfortunately, for Tyler. Tyler has yeah, this is probably a Wi-Fi issue for him. Let me check my text to see if he sent a message in here. Okay, he says, "Oh, cool, my computer restarted." Okay, so we'll get Tyler back in here for a second. Just stalling while the slideshow loads up for me. Okay, and then we will continue and wait for Tyler here. But our next tier here is going to be starters on a budget. The first player we have in this category is Mr. Juwan Johnson. I know Tyler is fired up to talk about Juwan Johnson, but this is where we are going to have the two tight ends in this segment of the show. So Mr. Juwan Johnson signed a 2-year, $6 million per year contract previously with the New Orleans Saints, and PFF projects him for a pretty significant raise at 3 years, $9.7 million per year. Why he could return to his previous team? The Saints are delusional. They do not have cap space, but maybe they view him as a long-term building block. I don't really know what his chances are there. Why the Chargers make sense? First and foremost is his relationship with Justin Herbert. He is obviously the Oregon tight end of that era. He was the tight end for the Oregon Ducks who clinched the Rose Bowl, and Juwan Johnson had this to say about being Justin Herbert's teammate. He said, quote, "Going to Oregon, I knew absolutely no one. It was a culture shock. Being there with Justin Herbert really helped me. He took me in. We became good friends. We had a lot of success on the field," end quote. So really, really good relationship there. When the Chargers play the Saints this year, there's a nice picture of the two of them sharing an embrace after the game. So they're legit friends. I believe they have trained together in the offseason. So there is definitely some connection here. Mr. Juwan Johnson was actually the second best veteran tight end in yards per route run versus man coverage. He was 5th in ESPN's charting among all tight ends. Again, that is yak, catch, open, and overall score. So the numbers for Juwan Johnson from an advanced standpoint, from a per play standpoint, are really, really good. This is a guy who checks a lot of boxes in that regard. He just has not had a ton of volume. All right, looks like we got Tyler back here just in time to talk about his guy, Juwan Johnson. So I was just saying the numbers are fantastic from a per play basis. There's not been a ton of volume, but he has hit over 500 yards receiving twice in the last 3 years. So there's a lot to like here, and I think he's unquestionably the best tight end available. Is he better than Stone Smart? Wants to know Calvin. Yes, very much so. Question that the Chargers are going to have to answer at tight end is: do they want to just wait for the draft, or do they want to make sure they take a need off the board and sign a free agent to solve the long-term future? If they want to do that, the latter, Juwan Johnson is easily the number one option, in my opinion.
This, I don't know why I didn't know this sooner or figure out any of this sooner. This is like the one. I think you probably already mentioned the Oregon connection, the Herbert connection. I mean, him being his receiver at Oregon, and then the walk-off on the Rose Bowl to seal the deal. The fact they became friends, the fact that there's a picture of them after the game this year talking after the game, because they potentially are still friends. The connection to Jeff Carpenter, the need at tight end, the fact that, look, to me, if it's, I like.
Wait, he's another one who has the connection to Jeff Carpenter?
Yes, because he was at Penn State and then transferred to Oregon. So yes, right. There's again, like this. I put the Avengers Endgame photo up because if you think about it, at any one particular time, there are 3 people with a connection to Jeff Carpenter. So I'm all in on this one. Not saying that he's an elite, player by any means, but I think the price tag is generally pretty fine. I would love for them to take this need off the board with someone that isn't going to break the bank. And I think just Will Dissly is such a plus for the Chargers. We'll talk about the Gesicki too, because you don't have to force it. Like, is he a blocker? And by the way, I think he spent like 40% of his snaps as an inline tight end. So it's not like he's a slot receiver only.
Yep.
Will Dissly affords you the capacity, the ability to get someone like this who doesn't have to be your primary blocker, but can contribute. And as Jose points out, look at the quarterback, same thing like with Darius Slayton. This is a guy who's, putting up 500 yards with nothing really to work with. I mean, Derek Carr trying to get people killed and throw up, it's just not the best quarterback situation over there with New Orleans. Not as bad as the Giants, but still not great. So to be that productive with them is impressive. And I do like that he worked his way from an undrafted free agent to where he is now. Yeah. If you want to like invest in someone who worked from nothing, his first tweet, this pinned tweet on his page is like, I just want to be employed. After he went undrafted.
That's great.
And to work now to a guy who could make $6 million a year is pretty cool. So I think him and Dissly as 2 tight ends. And if you want to find another guy in the draft, awesome. If somebody in the draft is way, way, way down there and you want to find somebody else in day 3, cool. But to walk in and say, okay, at 22, we don't have to force a tight end. I mean, you and I just did a mock draft, and it's not going to play that way specifically, but all that defensive talent that's there, it's going to be so hard to pass them because they have no tight end. Not that drafting Loveland's a horrible thing, but if you told me you get one of these freak edge rushers and, Juwan Johnson gives you 500 receiving yards, I'd take that. I'd definitely take that.
Hey, man. Will Dissly almost had 500 yards receiving. I know for a fact Juwan Johnson can give them more than that. And again, I love Will Dissly, but I think the main thing here with Juwan Johnson is really what we're talking about from a draft perspective. Do you want to go into the draft needing to have your long-term tight end, or do you want to have flexibility in the first round and be able to take, a player that you can start at defensive tackle, that you can start as an edge rusher, or at least use as a designated pass rusher? Do you want to take a corner who can be your cornerback 1? So signing Juwan Johnson for me says we're not taking a tight end in the first round. I think that signing him and also drafting Colston Loveland just doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Like, because they're, again, we've said this so many times today, but like I hate to sound like a broken record. Joe Ortiz wants to find surplus value at as many positions as humanly possible. If you sign a tight end and draft a tight end, one of those two players is probably not going to be on the field a whole lot. So if you sign Juwan Johnson, I think you're looking at a day 3 tight end. And there are some interesting pieces there that they could look at. And maybe that guy becomes something down the road. But if you sign Juwan Johnson, he is your tight end 1. And I think the numbers all point to somebody who can really justify that kind of role. Again, of any veteran in the league, of any starter in the league, he was second in yards per route run versus man coverage. Of any tight end in the league, he was 5th on ESPN's charting, ahead of most of the notable names at the position outside of like Dallas Goedert. So this is a guy who I think his best football is ahead of him. I think the numbers are fantastic. Obviously, there's a relationship here. Like, you're telling me that Justin Herbert can't get 700 yards out of Juwan Johnson, who he's like great friends with. I think that's on the table. Again, 500 yards from Will Dissly is pretty crazy. So I think this makes a ton of sense. This was not something I expected to head into today's show thinking like, yeah, like sign me up for Juwan Johnson. But
yeah,
the numbers are so good, and I didn't really put the connection together between him and Justin Herbert.
Yep, him, Herbert, Carpenter. It's funny, Calvin mentioned sounds like a young Jared Cook. Juwan Johnson mentioned, because they were both in New Orleans at a particular point, that he learned a lot from Jared Cook, and you can make all the Jared Cook jokes you want, but he had a very good career.
Yeah.
Learned from Jared Cook. Obviously, Jared Cook then went and played for Justin Herbert, so you can even give, I don't know, like some advice on like the NFL and Herbert. I don't know. There's just so many connections. The fit makes sense. It all makes sense. The price tag makes sense. It just eliminates a desperate need for you in the draft. I don't know, man. If I had to put money, I'd probably put it on this one, because relationships matter, and particularly with Herbert's weapons. Guyton stuck around maybe longer than he should have because of their relationship. Simi Fehoko, they have a great relationship. Of course, he might be back as well. I even know Herbert really knew they needed a receiver after the collapse in Jacksonville, and they went and got themselves a receiver. So I really do think that Herbert has some say in these things. And I think that Juwan Johnson is somebody he'd go, yeah, well, I know that guy. We're good friends. We can totally make it work. I've thrown to him before. Like, they understand how to work. It's been a while, but they understand how to work together. And they found chemistry in just 1 year, I believe, at Oregon. So yeah, I'm all in on this one.
Yeah, I think it checks a lot of boxes for them. Okay, next one here. We do have Mr. Hollywood Brown, former Baltimore Raven. So there's a few former Baltimore Ravens that we are going to talk about in free agency in all of these shows. Previous contract for the Chiefs was 1 year, $7 million. I'm actually a little surprised that the Chargers didn't try and kick the can here, given that specific tag. But he is currently projected as a 2-year, $9 million contract for Pro Football Focus. His decision in free agency is going to be interesting, because he barely played. Obviously, he broke his collarbone and had to have surgery on it. So he's not had a ton of opportunity to make plays with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I do think he does fit pretty well alongside Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. So we'll see what happens there. Former Ravens experience, obviously, is the big calling card here. 2021, it was the best season of his career. That was his only 1,000-yard season. But people out of saying hard pass here. I understand, there are concerns. But of the veteran wide receivers who are in this market, his ability to beat man coverage, I think, really stands out. 1.96 yards per route run versus man coverage in 2023. And he's still just 27. I think there's a lot of opportunity to get him to play the best football of his career going forward at this stage of his career. So we'll see what happens. But because of the connections, because of the experience, I think he's definitely worth somebody keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I have a hard time with this one, because of course there are things that he can do that fits. And you mentioned, playing out wide. And obviously we know he's fast, and the team, or at least the front office and some of the coaches, know him. So there's value to that. I don't know. This past year, kind of same with Cooper, just been basically a wash. You have here reportedly doesn't love Greg Roman's offense. Where's that from?
That is from a tweet from Robert Griffin III, who is very close with Hollywood Brown, who said that the main reason Hollywood wanted to seek a trade was because of Greg Roman. So I don't know. Like RG3 says a lot of things. I don't know like what how much face value we really want to put into RG3's tweets from 3 years ago. He was a young kid, obviously, at that point, looking for a big payday, probably too, and he didn't love being in a run heavy offense. I don't know. A lot can change in the NFL across 3 years. And the power of Jim Harbaugh, I think, can overcome any potential hatred for the offense. I don't know. Like, I don't know if this is factual, but RG3 said it, and so that's where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't blame him for not loving it. The other unfortunate thing is that, like, I don't think Greg Roman's offense has, been revolutionized and changed overnight. So I don't think
it's the exact same as 2011.
Sweet. So I don't know if he'll love that one. So I think it's a good option to consider, but I'm not a huge fan here.
Yeah, no, I think the price tag here also is a concern of mine because I don't quite understand why he would make more money than this past season, unless he turned down significant contract offers to play.
That's $9 million per year.
Yes, $9 million per year.
All right, we can move on to the next player. Sorry, I thought that was a $4.5 million a year thing.
No, that's my mistake. That's fair. That was $9 million per year for Mr. Hollywood Brown. But okay, we'll jump to Mike Gesicki, who is another former Penn State tight end who has the connections to Jeff Carpenter. I did not realize this, but he averaged a good hefty number of yards per route run versus man covers this past season. Again, for the Cincinnati Bengals, a bit of a resurgence for him because in New England he was not this productive as a tight end. Unlike Chris Godwin, I think the numbers and the reputation for Mike Gesicki do hold up. This man had 73 blocking snaps the entire season. Like he's not even like, there are so many wide receivers that have more blocking snaps than him. On his own team, he was like 9th in blocking snaps. So this is like your designated hitter for baseball. Like he is only a pass catcher. He is only going to run routes. Does that vibe with the Chargers? I think they could make it work. But the style fit is definitely a little bit more clunky. But the same kind of argument for Juwan Johnson. I think the Chargers could stand to take a player like this because of Will Dissly. And I think it takes the need off of the draft board. And I'm just such a big fan of taking that off the plate and just being able to take the best player available and not have to force a need. And so signing Mike Gesicki is not as much of a no-brainer as a Juwan Johnson, who I think is a much better stylistic fit, connections, everything like that. But at the same time, Gesicki fills a much-needed role within this offense to stretch the seam vertically. Contested catch percentage is generally very, very good. So this does make some sense. And to me, these are the two tight ends. I'm not interested in any other tight end in the market. It's Juwan Johnson and it's Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, Gesicki, I don't know. Kevin's bringing up his measurements: 6'9", 232. Wait, hold on. No, I don't think he's 6'9". That'd be a whole different ball game. He's 6'. I have him at 6'5.5", 247. Obviously, a very elite, like athletic profile in terms of speed and agility and everything. He is basically the same size as Hayden Hurst. A little bit taller, and I think 3 pounds lighter. That might have changed over the course of time. That's very possible, but in terms of where they were in the draft, he's actually about the same size. So I think they can make it work, and they'd be okay with it. Again, as we've mentioned, he's not their primary blocker. Yeah, it's a concern when Gesicki's on the field, like he ain't blocking. Not that it's the same thing, but when Gus Edwards was on the field, he wasn't pass catching. So there's definitely some
Correct.
like, you know what they're gonna do when Gesicki is out there or when Gus Edwards is out there,
or Scott Matlock.
Or Scott Matlock is out there. I guess even J.K. Dobbins, because they barely threw it to him either. So I guess they just run the football.
Yeah,
As running
he
back
at least would run routes. He would at least get out.
True.
Into the route.
That is fair. That is definitely fair. But I'd be for this as well. He's a kind of a 1-year deal kind of guy, 2-year deal for a bit now, and I'm fine with putting him with another quarterback from the 2020 class. It's worked with Tua and whoever the heck else was in Miami at the time, at like 2018 on. It's worked with Burrow, and I'm fine with him with Justin Herbert here.
Yes, I was a little surprised to hear him mentioned by Joe Burrow, but at the same time, I just sit there and think like, okay, which tight ends has Joe Burrow thrown to? And it's not been a good list. So Mike Gesicki was probably like a godsend for him. So we'll see what happens there.
What was his name? Who was that Bengals tight end? That was before that. Come on, fantasy football people. Who was the Bengals tight end? Yeah.
Because Uzama was in Cincinnati for a while.
Oh, I know. In the middle of all that,
in 2023, it was like Irv Smith, and it was just like horrible.
Maybe he wasn't with Tyler Eifert. There we go. Tyler Eifert.
He was a good player for a while.
Yeah, great. He was good. Though. He just never, couldn't stay on the field.
So. To me, again, this is the only other tight end I'm interested in the market. So if these two guys sign elsewhere, then we know that they're getting one in the draft, in my opinion.
Yeah, if they do nothing at tight end, I feel very strongly that it's a guy at 22.
Yeah. All right. So these the last category here we have is contributors and role players. The first one here has to be Deontay Johnson because they tried to trade for him. And then they tried to claim him on waivers after the Ravens cut him. So they have definitely expressed an interest in Deontay Johnson. And you want to talk about surplus value? You want to talk about a chance at compensatory picks? Deontay Johnson at 1 year, a $3 million contract like that. There's a good way that gets done if you're willing to kind of deal with all of the concerns here. So, he left a lot of money on the table this year. The biggest concern is again, for several of these players, what happened in 2024? The Panthers were like so happy when they got rid of him.
And they got better.
And then the Ravens had no interest in playing him. And the way that John Harbaugh talked about him is just so concerning. And then the Texans cut him before they had a playoff game. They were like, we don't want this guy anymore. And so the Ravens re-signed him. So they can basically potentially get a compensatory pick. He's not going back there. So he will be available, but there are definitely concerns. There are definitely positives to him as well, though.
So the Chargers had no issue, but they went out and got themselves like Tart, for example, where there were some concerns released by multiple teams, worried about his ability to stay on the field, his motivation, whether he could be a contributor. They went out and got him. So they will take a flyer, and clearly they were interested twice in this player. So I almost expect him to be a Charger because I don't know why you would be before and not now. But the concern, look at the previous contract: 2 years, $36.7 million. This year, 1 year, $3 million. Like that's the deal you're going to get from where you were. Just speaks to how much of a drop off there was, how disappointing he's been. I'm generally pretty worried about all those concerns. If he joins the Chargers, then it's like, okay, as an individual, I'm looking at him just without a team I'm rooting for. It's concerning. With the Chargers, if the Chargers made the decision to bring him in, and it sounds like they wanted to, I'd get it and I'd trust them. Like, I feel like they could make it work and get him on the field, and especially for a guy where if it doesn't work with the Chargers, let's say it is the Chargers, might be it. Eventually, it might be it for him. But it definitely does mean something, and I'm curious what the Texans saw, and obviously what the Ravens saw, because the Texans watched Tank Dell like take his leg and it went the other direction, and they still decided to cut Deontay Johnson. They're like, nah, we don't need Deontay Johnson, even after the issues that they suffered on offense. So, and Diggs tore his ACL, I believe. Like they had pretty significant injuries, and they still went, nah, it's okay with Deontay Johnson. So a lot of homework to do there. So if I were a neutral fan, I'd maybe stay away. As a fan of the Chargers, I'd get it if they signed him, and I'd get the comp pick idea.
Yeah, I think if you sign Deontay Johnson, he cannot be your only signing, in my opinion. You essentially have to sign Deontay with insurance that if he is going to be the same kind of person, that you're not screwed, right? So if you sign Deontay, you probably also have to sign a Darius Slayton, a somebody like that ahead of him on this show. So, oh, did Antonio Gates make it?
Oh, snap. Wait, hold on. Let's see. Wow. Yep. Antonio Gates, the Hall of Fame. Man. Good thing this was the first year he was eligible.
That's so good. That's so good. Yeah. Let's go, Antonio Gates.
Man, I didn't get to see him live his entire career, but I remember, that the hat trick game against the Seahawks. I watched his record-setting touchdown against the Dolphins. I think they lost that. Yeah, they lost that game. Thanks, Koo. But old memories. But it was a great moment. I mean, Gates was something else. Something else. We really watched some special players play for the Chargers, and Gates was outstanding. Glad he got in. Still don't know why he didn't get in the first time, but I'm glad he is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think the fact that he was not a first ballot Hall of Famer is kind of a joke. It defeats really like what makes the Hall of Fame, right? Like, you are supposed to reward the best players at their position. And this is a guy who obviously set the record for tight end touchdowns. This is a guy who changed the position. This is a guy who went from an undrafted free agent basketball player to one of the best players ever at his position. So this to me was somebody that should have absolutely been a first ballot Hall of Fame player. And the fact that he wasn't is a damn shame, but better late than never. I'm happy that he made it. One of the biggest reasons of why I am a Chargers fan, obviously LT got so much of the shine from me as a kid because he was like the big flashy running back and he was an MVP and stuff like that. But as I got older and Antonio Gates continued to play for the Chargers, he was a huge reason of why I stayed being a Chargers fan. Because, I mean, how many kids from Utah would have switched teams, because the Chargers were not exactly great when I was in high school and college. But, Antonio Gates, Phillip Rivers are the main two reasons of why I stuck around as a Chargers fan.
Yeah, he was awesome. Loved hearing him speak. Love what he does in the community. Just great guy, great Chargers ambassador.
People are saying that was Justin Tucker Walter Payton Man of the Year. Is that real?
No, there's no way. There's no way. That can't be. Internet would be exploding. I don't know who the Walter Payton Man of the Year is. Patrick Surtain is defensive. I guess we're getting an update.
I don't think they've announced it yet. Have they?
I got Burrow's comeback, Gates Hall of Fame, Eric Allen Hall of Fame, Sterling Sharp Hall of Fame, Jared Allen Hall of Fame.
That's good. Jared Allen was really, really good.
Yeah.
They must not have announced that because I feel like they try and end the show with Walter Payton Man of the Year.
Jared Verse, Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think both of our edge won, but no one will ever give us any credit for that.
If they do Justin Tucker after all the stuff that came out, that's yikes.
That'd be amazing. No, I don't see it though.
Okay.
Well,
he was posted in the chat.
Oh, it was Eli. Oh, that's right. Oh, so Eli didn't make it as a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Eli was up for it, but he has no business being in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
I don't know if he has no business, but
dude, he was
Patriots is fine for me.
I don't want to rant about it, but anyways, we'll get back to the show here. Deontay Johnson again on the field production, I think makes sense for what the Chargers need. He was 31st in open score, so he is a legit separator. He is a legit player who can win against man coverage. There are definitely some concerns. The Chargers have expressed interest. The last thing I was going to say about the concerns is that they did just kind of do this same thing with Tier Tart. Tier Tart had some character concerns.
Did you miss me say this entire thing?
I think I got distracted from everything else that was going on. Okay,
you're good.
We already talked about this. Okay.
You're good.
We are on our A games tonight, but it's okay. Next one here is De'Ami Brown. currently a Washington Commanders, just finishing up his rookie contract. He was somebody that we loved coming out of the draft from North Carolina. PFF does not have his contract projection available. He is not one of their top 100 free agents. So I can't imagine he would be that expensive, and I think he would be a good fit for the Chargers.
Yep. Not the fastest 40 time, but a vertical guy for sure. Love what he did, I believe, at North Carolina. Looked great there. Has done basically nothing with the Commanders and almost did nothing the entire year. Then he pulled a reverse Amari Cooper and exploded in the postseason. And that is great for my priors. And I'd love to see him join the Chargers.
Somebody said that Tony Jefferson got comeback player of the year votes. That is so funny if that's true.
Sure. You know.
Oh, yep, he sure did.
Did he write something? Did he say something
he about it? He got 4 votes total. I think.
That's awesome. No way.
But Joe Burrow ran away with that one, man. That's a shame.
What did do we have did Dobbins?
JK got second.
Oh, he got second. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, De'Ami Brown makes a lot of sense. I think he's probably going to stay in Washington. I mean, he had 250 yards plus in or almost 250 yards in the postseason. But the yak ability here was a surprise. His ESPN score was 7th highest in the league among wide receivers. So I think this is a player who was never really cast properly in Washington. This, the playoff run might be an exception, but the vertical threat, the yards after catch ability, I think makes a lot of sense for the Chargers.
I'm sorry. I was on just Jefferson's tweets, and Jesse Minter didn't get a single assistant coach of the year vote.
No, not one. Yeah, mate, it's ridiculous.
Cool.
Okay, last one here is Mr. Matt Collins. I had to include him. He's one of my favorite potential depth options for this team. He's signed 3 one-year, $2.6 million contracts in a row. So I think that's probably the cost that you have to get him to come back. He loves playing in Buffalo, loves playing with Josh Allen. So there is a good chance that he sticks around there. I think he really fits with what they want to do. I think he really fits with what the Chargers want to do. He was 22nd in ESPN's catch score. He's had very traditionally a very low drop rate, including 2 seasons with 0 drops in his career. If you picture a sacrificial X wide receiver, this is Matt Collins. He runs the go routes. He runs the post routes. Yeah. And he does it very, very well. He had the 10th highest ADOT in the league last season. And this is a guy who is unselfish. He does all the little things. Mm-hmm. He is big. He is physical. He will play special teams. He will block his ass off. I just want Matt Collins on the Chargers for the vibes, but he does fit what they need as well. Again, similar to Deontay, he can't be your only signing.
Right.
But hypothetically speaking, you sign Chris Godwin or Darius Slayton, and then you also bring in Matt Collins as your wide receiver 4 special teams X player. It makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that this is a guy who can really fit what the Chargers want to do. He had 650 yards for the Raiders that one year he was there. So there is like legit production here. And again, I just think the vibes would be outstanding if you bring in Matt Collins.
Yeah, as someone who watches more Raiders film than a lot of Chargers fans, not film, games than Chargers fans, and being emotionally kind of invested in those games with my dad, Matt Collins was awesome. I wanted him on the Chargers when he left the Raiders because you watch him make tackles on special teams. It really is. If it sounds like a Simi Fehoko description, it is kind of similar, but he will give you 500, 650 yards on the Raiders. Like, he can actually step in and be a very solid, consistent receiving contributor for you. So yeah, this would be an awesome signing for the Chargers. I'd be all for it if they go with, not mid-tier with Godwin, but not Tee Higgins numbers. You go Hollins, Godwin over, say, a single with Tee Higgins. I get it. I would totally buy it.
Yeah, I would as well. I think there's a good opportunity for the Chargers to, maybe not hit a home run like you mentioned, but if they can get, on base here for the wide receiver room, I think that it would make a lot of sense. And again, just stylistically going out and getting Chris Godwin and Matt Collins, it just makes so much sense to me for what they want to be in this room, what they want to be you know, as a team, it just the checks a lot of boxes. There weren't any direct coaching ties that I could find for Matt Collins, but again, it's just kind of like a stylistic fit more than anything else for me.
Yeah, definitely. But his name is Mac, and he is a former Raider, and that does work out when they join the Chargers. So,
Yeah,
I this could very well be on the table if they want to spend defensively. They want to go to get Carlton Davis and Osa, and they want to make a bit more of a cheaper attempt at upgrading the offense. They go Matt Collins, Juwan Johnson. Is any Chargers fan going to freak out and go crazy? Actually, yes, because I saw them do that with DJ Chark and Brendan Rice and these guys. But you could add
Ben Mason.
Do I even want to talk about it? They could add 1,000 receiving yards with $9 million in 2025. And you know what, man? That'd be big for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I am really glad that you put Juwan Johnson on here. The more I think about it, the more that one makes sense. And so I feel better about their opportunity to get some upgrades on offense than I did heading into this show. And hopefully for some of you guys, you feel the same way.
Yeah, but still balanced. Like, I feel like there were players we were concerned with and we addressed the concerns, and everybody has concerns. You're not hitting free agency because you're amazing all the time.
Yeah.
So it felt balanced, but yeah, that was good.
Yeah. All right, we'll get to some of these super chats. I can't believe we talked for an hour and 15 minutes about that, but classic us. Dark Samus wants to know what trait makes Chris Jones an elite pass rusher. The fact that he is 315 pounds and can play edge rusher and one technique and three technique. He is probably like the best pound for pound athlete in the NFL, like just given his size and the way that he can move and extremely technically refined. So yeah, all of that stuff.
Yeah, consistent. I remember when because the Chiefs had no edge rushers, they tried to make him an edge rusher. And we were kind of like, oh, thank goodness you're making Chris Jones an edge rusher. And it wasn't great at first, but now it's a part of the game that it's like he's unstoppable. I forget who he was playing. Was it like the final play of the game against the Bills? I forget who it was, but they needed to seal the game. And Chris Jones was at edge and got a sack. It's just, it's ridiculous. The guy's insane.
Yeah, the Chiefs have a few players like this, unfortunately. And then Spags, just mad scientist, knows how to use all of them. Really pisses me off that nobody will hire that man. But Chris Jones is like most versatile defensive lineman in the league, bar none. Physical freak, power, speed, all that stuff. So, yeah, it really sucks. Hopefully he retires sometime soon. Next one in here from Blake. He wants to know our thoughts on bringing Keenan back. His chemistry with Herbert is noteworthy, in my opinion.
I don't think Keenan would wait for an opportunity until after the draft, but I could see the Chargers, after going through free agency in the draft, if Keenan's not signed and they don't have that need filled, I could see that. But I think it's the only time I could see them making that move.
Yeah, I don't think this is something they hit right away with free agency. The on-field fit is very clunky to me. I know Ladd can play outside, but his best work is from the slot. Keenan Allen cannot play outside. He is absolutely exclusively a slot receiver at this stage of his career. And can Justin Herbert make that work? Probably. But if we're trying to maximize the roles within the offense, I think this fit is really, really clunky. And I love Keenan Allen. He is one of my favorite Chargers of all time. But I don't love the fit in this offense. I don't love the fit next to Ladd. I would much rather see the Chargers go out and sign some of the players that we talked about in this show tonight.
Yeah, weird to say I agree, but I get it.
Next question, also about potentially asking about Mike Williams signing back. See, Mike, I would get because Mike fills a very specific need that this Chargers offense is missing. Again, if you can go sign Darius Slayton and Mike Williams, I think that complements each other very well. I think that fits the room. But with Mike, like, the question is, what does he look like after another year coming off the ACL? If he can be 80% of what the Chargers had with him, I think it makes some sense. But last year with the Steelers and Jets, he was basically only a jump ball back shoulder fade guy. Like, there was nothing else on the tape that he was doing at even a remotely high level. So there's definitely some concerns there, but I would at least maybe give him a call.
Yeah, I think you have to for sure.
Envy Town with our next one says, I've been pounding the table for interior defensive line help. Is there great options upcoming for us in free agency that's actually plausible, if not favorite draft prospect? It's a very layered question, but the defensive tackle free agent market is fantastic, and the defensive tackle draft class is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I might end up having like 10 defensive tackles in my top 50 this year. Like, it is stacked. I just watched Darius Alexander from Toledo, and that man is a freak. And I love this defensive tackle class. I keep getting to players I really like. So I mentioned to him earlier about in free agency. Osa Odigizua is my guy. I would love to see that signing. He just changes the pass rush ceiling. But even outside of that, you have Milton Williams, you have Levi Onwuzurike, all good pass rushers who they could potentially target in free agency. And obviously, we talked about Puna Ford and Tier Tart on a previous episode.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into some free agents for the defensive line. We'll do this for defensive line, same kind of exercise. Yeah. But even like late in the draft, like Jordan Phillips, the Maryland defensive tackle, you're thinking, okay, we're way late in the draft now. Still a good prospect. Like, there's so many guys in this group. It's going to be a fun one. I don't know how we're doing our rankings for these guys.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible. Okay, so still no Walter Payton Man of the Year award yet, for those wondering. Cash Cab says, feel like game-changing scenarios like receptions on third and medium long or ability to beat man coverage to bail out the offense should hold more value than a 1,000-yard, 8-touchdown guy, regardless of slot or X.
I get that. Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe the whole season's, average or above average, but in the moments in the postseason, gotta have it in Arrowhead. You want, you're going to pay Tee Higgins for those moments, and hopefully he has a better season than 1,000 yards. So I get that too. That's a good argument too.
Yeah, you definitely want players who can rise up, and I think Ladd showed that ability in the playoff game. He was the only answer on offense. But you need more players like that for sure. It's a good point from Cash Cat. Dark Samus thinks the Chargers should still draft Colston Loveland if they sign Juwan Johnson. I guess I could see it if Juwan Johnson is a 1-year contract. But if he gets the 3-year contract that PFF projects, then I don't think that's a reasonable ask. I think you're unfortunately wasting resources there.
Yeah, I agree there.
Chris Lewis says, I don't know Juwan Johnson. He looks like a player that I would like, but Roman likes big, slow tight ends. That's just, it's just not true. I mean, he had Mark Andrews for years, Vernon Davis in San Francisco. That's just not true. All due respect to Chris. Not trying to be a jerk or anything, but that's just not true.
Yeah. They haven't gone and signed out like 10 RAS guys, but no, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, Hayden Hurst is not slow. That's not why he didn't result in anything.
No, it was everything else.
It was everything else. Stone Smart's fast. So
he is. True. That is true. Fisk.
Envy Town says Gates make the Hall of Fame. Yes. Which is fantastic. Breeze B. OT, could the Bolts draft by prioritizing an interior pass rusher and build the interior like how the Wolverines were built, as opposed to targeting a defensive end on the edge?
Okay, so OT, I'm trying to figure out what OT is, but could the Bolts draft by prioritizing an interior pass rusher and build the interior like how the Wolverines are built, as opposed to targeting a defense end? I mean, that's fair. Yeah, because Michigan's, even their tackles were just guards. Like, all their tackles are guard converts. So I understand what you're going for there. I think they definitely could prioritize interior pass rusher. I don't know about interior draft wise. Doesn't seem like it's great, and Steven's so far not a huge fan. So, but if you do free agency draft combo, sure, I could see them doing that.
Are you talking about an offensive line?
Oh, they're just talking about the interior. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they were talking about interior pass rusher and interior like offensive line. Never mind.
Okay,
gotcha.
Yeah, I think this is mostly a defensive question, but it is a good point that the Michigan teams were definitely built on the inside out. Obviously, you're talking about Kenneth Grant, Chris Jenkins, Mozzie Smith, all these guys versus, Jesse Minter never really had great pass rushers. On the edge, he did not get to coach Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. So it is pretty interesting to see kind of what they will go moving forward. But, the first thing he said at his press conference when he was hired was these edge rushers, man, like it just is different in the NFL. So I think they're going to prioritize both. But, the defensive line is going to look very different from last year, I think.
Yep. It's going to look great with Myles Garrett there.
Okay. Chris, Dark Samus says Chris Jones has 99 strength in Madden. I believe it.
Cool.
Envy Allen. I haven't played Madden in like at least half a decade. Like it's been a long time since I picked up a Madden controller.
No, I've played a Retro Bowl since I stopped playing Madden, but I think once I started dating, I stopped playing video games. So,
yeah. Envy Talent wants my Eli rant. So I don't know how much I'm going to rant about this. But to me, the number one requirement of the Hall of Fame is you have to be an elite player at your position. And Eli Manning was never an elite quarterback. He was never an all-pro quarterback. He never received a single MVP vote. He made 4 Pro Bowls in a weaker NFC contract. So, like, that's cool, I guess. But outside of beating Tom Brady twice in the Super Bowl, which really was always more about the defense, there's no real, like, defining Eli Manning moments here. There's no real, like, this is a Hall of Fame resume. And so I don't think that this is a guy who has any right to be in the Hall of Fame. Whenever you look at that era of quarterbacks, I think you get to like 8 or 9 guys who played in the 2000s that were always better than Eli Manning on any given season. This is like making an argument that Dak Prescott is a Hall of Fame if Dak had 2 Super Bowl wins. And that's just like, it's just not true. Like, I like Dak Prescott. I think you can win games with Dak Prescott. I think you can win games with Eli Manning. But he led the league more in interceptions than he ever did in any other category. And so this is just not a player who, if his last name were Richardson, he's not even considered for a Hall of Fame vote. But the fact that his name is Eli Manning, people think he should be billed out to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. So it's just, to me, it's just not what the Hall of Fame is about. We have guys like Steve Smith and Torrey Holt who can barely get into the Hall of Fame, and Steve Smith is still not in the Hall of Fame. And
that's crazy.
He's 6th in receiving yards all time. He was one of the best receivers of his generation. If we're going to hold receivers and offensive linemen and defensive linemen and coaches to the standard of you have to be one of the best, we have to do it for quarterback. And Eli Manning is objectively, he's not one of the 5 best quarterbacks from his generation. And that's my thing with him. But cool, like great 2 Super Bowls, I guess.
Yes, great Super Bowl moments for sure. So does he get in? And
I think he does. I think he does because of the magnitude of those Super Bowls. But I don't think he should even be considered. I don't think he should be a finalist. I don't think he should be like this. My opinion is that you have to be an elite player, and he was never that.
Does Rivers get in?
I unfortunately do not think Rivers gets in the Hall of Fame. But as an individual, he has a better resume than Eli because he's been an all-pro player. He's received MVP votes. He's been to more Pro Bowls. He's been at times, one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league. Eli was never any of those things, but he doesn't have the Super Bowls. So unfortunately, I don't think Rivers gets in.
I think winning a playoff game with Mike McCoy as your coach deserves, and Lynn for what it's worth. Although Lynn was good at the time.
Yeah. I think Rivers will just be one of those guys, unfortunately, like always gets to be like a finalist and never gets in. But the Hall of Fame is very strict. And unfortunately, I don't think guys like Rivers and Eli Manning should get in.
Yeah, bummer, but I get it.
Yeah. Oh, we had another super chat in here from Cash Cab. Saquon would be the 27th highest paid receiver. Should we put more value on upgrading to someone elite? Love or hate Eck here, but he was a great pass catching running back. The Chargers definitely are a team that could pay a running back. Unfortunately, this running back class is dog shit.
It would be irresponsible. I think it'd be irresponsible given this running back class to pay a running back because your best bet is Najee Harris, which you would just okay, we're going to hand it off 250 times and get 4 yards a carry, and we're going to get 1,000 yards and call it a day. Like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
Am I paying $12 million for that? No, I'm okay.
If last year's free agency class were this year, then yeah, 100% you're signing probably a Josh Jacobs or a Saquon or a Derrick Henry. One of those guys is probably a Charger.
Mm-hmm.
But this free agent running back class is awful. Like it's not good. And we had to get through quite a few names. And I love J.K. Dobbins, and I think familiarity wise and just like what he gives you as an explosive playback, it has a lot of value for the Chargers. But if I were another team, I'm not signing a guy with that injury history at that position. There's just no way. So this running back class is awful. So I if I needed a running back this year, I am drafting one. I am not signing one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. That is going to do it for us tonight. Hour and a half podcast for you guys on a lot of different topics here, but we always greatly appreciate you guys jumping in here. 14 super chats on a Thursday night is fantastic. So it means a lot. Tyler, any final thoughts before we head out here?
No shot. I thought we'd go 91 minutes on this, but here we are. And I guess Gates making the Hall of Fame is awesome. So congratulations to Antonio Gates. I know you've been watching this entire show while you're sitting there in the award ceremony. We love you, appreciate you. And I think, it was the first jersey my dad ever bought for the Chargers because he wanted to wear it. And then he took it off and left it in the car. Then I think he ended up like throwing it out because he couldn't possibly stomach it. So thank you, Antonio Gates, for all the memories.
Yeah. Antonio Gates was I always wanted to play tight end, even though I was definitely an offensive lineman. But I was like, I convinced myself making the transition from middle school to high school that I could go play tight end. And then my coach was like, no, you're a left tackle, buddy. Like, we're going to stick you out there still. Keep playing there. And I was like, okay, whatever. But I wanted to go be a tight end. I wanted to wear number 85. My coaches had other plans, and rightfully so. I think they made the right decision for me. But love Antonio Gates. He's just he's fantastic. So one of my favorite players of all time.
Before we sign off, good night to all and good morning to Michael, who's been here. It's 2 a.m., I believe, for him.
Yes. Love that. So, all right. We appreciate you guys so much. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you next time. As always, Bolt up.